Take the question was, Gabby, can anybody take the question? Or Emmanuel? Yeah, I think we are having issues with connecting.
Let me take that. I think Smart Africa is doing a fantastic job, and we need other African countries to be part of the consortium so that we can work together to do things. Look, one of the things that we did as Ghana, we sponsored the e-payment system for Africa, which has been accepted globally within the African continent. And that's the Afri-Exim Bank PAP system. Okay, Ghana sponsored that. And we worked with Smart Africa. We considered everything out there at the time, and we realized that the PAPs, maybe not perfect, but it will do the job. That is the sort of collaboration we need, and work with Smart Africa, provision something, and the rest of Africa use it. We cannot waste money and reinvent the wheel. So these things, even in Ghana, we've considered assembling mobile devices here. It just didn't work out. So, you know, it's some of the things that we're looking at. But I think every country should bring it closer so that we can be able to assemble these things and reduce the cost of these devices for our citizenry.
No, thank you very much. I think that's a really good thing. If we can also create employment and create capacity. So just on the capacity issue, I just wanted to come to Sabina. So what are the key challenges that you see in all this DPI? It doesn't have to be related to payments per se.
Yes, I would want to start with payments. Thank you very, very much, William. I think for me, the critical challenge is around inclusivity. Are the systems that we are creating and putting in place systematically onboarding the most vulnerable customers, the ones that are particularly excluded from formal finance system? And you can apply that same, vision to whether it's identity as well, or whether we're looking at the data networks as part of the different pillars of the digital public infrastructure. We hear a lot about inclusivity. Defining it is not quite that simple. But for us at Africanenda and looking at the payment systems, we see a spectrum where you can assess the type of inclusivity that's going on within a system. So at the most basic level of inclusivity for us, the system has to enable access widely. What does that mean? One, making sure that the most used channel is available in your system. And because we are a mobile-driven continent, if you have a payment system that's not enabling mobile money or mobile access, you have an issue. The second tier of that basic inclusivity is also usability of the system. If your system is just enabling me to store money in a wallet and that's it, I can just cash in and cash out, you really haven't done much in terms of inclusivity and usability for me as a consumer. So at the bare minimum, that system has to enable person-to-person transfer, but also person-to-business payment. So whether it's merchant payment, it's utility bills payment, it has to have these minimum opportunities. So, and even there, we consider you as very basic inclusivity. It's the minimum you need to do to convince somebody who's living in a cash economy that there's value to move to digital. Now, the second, as you move on that inclusivity pathway, the second, I would say, bucket for us is what we call progressive inclusivity. At that level, you already have the basic criteria. Now, you're enabling interoperability all to all, whether the person is using a mobile money or it's using a bank account or micro saving account. It has to be interoperable all to all, and regardless of which provider they're dealing with. That's the beauty of interoperability, right? And from a consumer perspective, if I am vulnerable, if I'm living on $1 a day, I don't see how you can justify to me to go sign with another provider so I can send money to my mom who's actually with that other provider. So you're enabling interoperability all to all. the central bank or financial regulator is part of the governance of the payment system. Why? Because they have the ability to mitigate private interest versus public interest versus the inclusivity mandate they have most of the time in the national financial inclusion strategy at a country or regional level. So accessibility to all the providers to that payment system is also key, because at the end of the day, for us as a consumer, we want competition. We want to deal with whoever is going to provide the best value to us, and that only happens if all licensed service providers are part of the payment system at a country level. That is what we consider progressed inclusivity for us. There is also an aspirational level of inclusivity which we call mature inclusivity. But at that point, you're enabling all use cases possible. So whether it's, we say payment to person, person to business, you're enabling government to person to government, business to businesses. So it's an all digital ecosystem, so that I as a consumer have no reason to go back to cash, because every single need I want to do, every payment needs to have, you're providing an access to be able to do that. So that's one piece of that mature inclusivity, enabling all your use cases. The second piece, we are in a digital world, and we recognize that it's also an instant payment world. So a bit more risky, especially if I, as a consumer, I make a mistake. I'm also vulnerable to scams, potential fraud. So having a really strong consumer protection safeguards around that payment system with recourse opportunities that are very transparent. So I know what's my recourse. I know if my transaction doesn't go through, whom I need to complain to, and I have faith that they will actually provide a resolution to that. And if there isn't, then there is an escalation process that's going to bring that forth to the regulator, so I get some type of resolution. So that's also part of that mature inclusivity. There's a cost component also. It's not only about providing access and use cases. If this is not affordable to the 400 million excluded adults that we want to target, and the ones that are the most vulnerable, then we still miss the mark from an inclusivity perspective. So as low cost as possible is a component of that mature inclusivity as well. And last but not least for us, from an ecosystem perspective, it's really key that all the stakeholders are working together to deliver that mature inclusivity. And it's a win-win, because if we are at that level, then of course there are more of us customers using the system, and therefore there are also more benefits for the providers. So just to give you that spectrum of inclusivity and a reality check of where we stand today in Africa. As part of the State of Inclusive Instant Payment System report, we do this landscape every year. Last year, we had 32 instant payment systems live in Africa. Out of those 32, only 5 were at progressed inclusivity level, none at mature inclusivity. We had 15 at basic inclusivity, so 5 and 15, you're already 20. There were 12 we couldn't even rate, because we didn't have the information, or they only enable one use case, person to person, and not the person to business, or they didn't even allow the most used channel to be accessible. So that gives you an idea of where we are. Long way to go on inclusivity. It's an ecosystem play. It's a village needed to educate one kid. So we all need to come together and see how we can improve the inclusivity of these payment systems and DPI at large.
Well, thank you very much, Sabina. Inclusivity is my language. I just feel that Africa is doing well, but there are still a lot of people that we can support. So I just want to come to you, Gabby. You've heard some of the challenges. You've been implementing, digital ID between the two countries. So can you tell us what some of your challenge, what do you think are some of the big challenges for us meeting the needs of the majority of our citizens across the continent?
Oh, okay, thank you. We have multiple challenges, and I'm pretty sure most of them are known. We have the challenge related to financing. Implementing an ID solution in a country, you need a lot of funding. And most of the time, government don't have that funding available right away sometimes. So the challenge is vary from a country to another. In some countries, you might face the money problem. In some others, you might face infrastructure problem. And in others, the whole mentality of adopting an open source solution. So the challenges varies from one country to another. But let me tackle this issue on a different angle. And it's more about adoption of DPIs than implementing ID solution in a country. So the biggest challenge nowadays is the implementation of policies in place. Why am I talking about that? So money, infrastructure, data centers, security, we already have everything in place. Technology is not the main issue. Policies are the issue. We are talking about Ghana Card. Ghana Card is very great. It's a success for Ghana. Congratulations. But let's now talk about interoperability. Is it interoperable? Let's talk about cross-border. If I go to Togo, if I go to Nigeria, will I be able to use that Ghana card the same way I'm using it in Togo? The same way I'm using it in Ghana, sorry. So those are the main challenges. We want to do great. I think someone mentioned, I don't know if it's Juliet or someone mentioned cross-border, someone mentioned interoperability. So we are doing, everybody is doing its own things, but we need to have a common way of doing things. Technology is there, it's great, it's doable, but how can we make one success in a country benefit another one? So if I do my own thing, if Ghana does its own thing, if Kenya does its own thing, we are back at point zero. So let's find a way to make it all one. Let's find a way to have a common solution that will benefit every country. We are African Union, but if the reality of a country is different from the other one, okay, back to the implementation in a country. I have a country, everything was ready for them to adopt the solution. So I told them, okay, I can get it up and running for you in 3 weeks. And they told me we don't have the physical infrastructure. I said, fine, I have everything ready to get it up and running for you in the cloud. He said, okay, we are a no cloud policy country. Okay, but the policies in place said you can do it in the cloud. They said, yes, but we have our own policies in the country saying no cloud because of our political situation. And I said, so what do we do now? We had to put the project on hold for 8 months because they needed to do procurement. And you know the World Bank loves procurement. They'll drag you for 1 year and you will still not get it. I hope there is no one from the World Bank here. So, yeah, so those are what we really need to focus on. And we have the issue of capacity building also, which is a whole other debate. We keep talking about it, and nothing is really happening yet. So I can say it's still the beginning, but I'm pretty sure we will get there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Juliet, he has talked about public, but yeah, what challenges do you see? And then we'll go online, and then sadly our time is running out, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think Gabby has captured it really well. We don't have an infrastructure problem, we don't have a technology problem. We have, and I think this was also mentioned yesterday, first we have a policy and regulatory problem in terms of aligning frameworks, allowing us to work across border, procurement, allowing us to, really channel our resources in a useful way and in a very holistic way. And something else also that came up yesterday was the courage, I suppose, which is countries don't really speak to each other, don't really seem to trust each other. And I think trust is a big component of where the challenge is, which for me, I think from my standpoint, policy and regulatory frameworks can help to alleviate some of these trust concerns. So if we're thinking about cybersecurity, privacy, these are the issues that keep us from leveraging the cloud. If we're thinking about localization, worried about your local economy, local industry, thinking that global players are coming in to leverage and to take away from your country rather than to input, this is a barrier. We need to think more broadly, more collaboratively, and I still strongly believe government is the one to lead that. I think among the technology and the infrastructure and the users especially, they are the ones who are really looking for these products and services to make their lives easier, to not always cash out on their mobile wallet platforms.
Yeah.
And maybe just one last point is, yesterday I went into the digital village, or is it the little village outside here, to buy a packet of plantain chips. I'm from Kenya, so I'm on M-Pesa, and the guy told me it is not possible. I could not buy his products. And he said, do you have ECD? I said, I just came into the country yesterday. I do not have ECD. Do you have anything? Do you have cards? And I said, I have card, but I prefer not to. I have M-Pesa, you have M-Pesa. What's the problem? And so I think this was a very live problem of what we're discussing in here, and the challenges are literally being felt right outside the center. And so if we're able to crack this cross-border payments, cross-border trust, collaboration, I think then people like our Tainers, he was smart enough to give me a packet of chips, so now you guys all know I'm doing free advertising. So please buy some chips from the guys outside. But I think that's a very live problem of what we're trying to address in the room here.
Okay. Right. No, thank you very much. I'll give the last word to Thelma, if you're still online. Show us how the connectivity works. Yeah. So, Thelma, yeah, so we have a few minutes left. Maybe you were cut off, and apologies for that, but maybe you can tell us some of the challenges, or at least one challenge for the last few minutes that we have that you feel Africa needs to address. Hi, Thelma. Hi, Thelma. I think it's not, the connectivity is still not, it's not working. Okay. Thelma, it seems you can't hear us. So I'll sort of sum up. I mean, this for me has been very exciting. I've learned a lot. Some of the stats that we've had here, for me, tells me that, there's still a lot of work for us to do in this space. There's a lot of work that we need to do coming together. You've talked about government, and it's government that has to lead. So, we have to have some kind of leadership. We've got to bring things together and stop working in silos. We've talked a lot about Africa Union and that being important, yet for simple things, we are still even divided, even in the country, let alone on the continent. One of the things that we are keen to follow up on, at least from an MT4D point of view, is trying to bring some sort of champions together around digital public infrastructure. There are people who are knowledgeable, who know about this stuff. We need to bring them together and start having smaller roundtable discussions to try and break down some of these barriers that we are talking about. So that's one thing that we really want to do. The second thing is also, we need to continue talking about it. We don't want to have talk shops, but I think there are certain key issues around like device and what can we actually produce on the continent. I think that's a really good point that we heard. We can manufacture these things here. I don't see why we cannot do some of these things here to bring the cost down. So these are things that I think we should be talking about, and we should just let the conversations continue, so it doesn't just become a talking shop, to put some action to it. So thank you very much for joining us in this first panel. And I thank you to the panel and to those online. They are still there, and know that somehow through the magic of cloud technology, they will hear us. So thank you all very much. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.
We believe that mobile money holds more significance than a simple payment. It brings financial security and supports our children's education. It realizes the fruits of our labor and helps us enjoy our leisure time. It brings comfort to those living far away and provides support to relatives and friends. It empowers a better future and helps manage daily budgets. It inspires technological innovation and encourages cultural integration. It promotes globalization and strengthens localization. It is a responsibility, a duty of care, a basis for life, and a mission. Determined to make life better, Huawei Mobile Money is leading innovation for the development of global digital finance and provides digital finance to every person and every organization to create a better life.
So we'll have our two ladies flanked by two gentlemen. Now this topic Thomas is very interesting. Integrating AI with DEI.
Pathways to enhance efficiency and inclusivity. I'm really, really happy for all of you being here. Your presence in this room is testament to your commitment to ensuring that technology is leveraged in Africa and everybody has a share of the cake. So on behalf of the men, and especially women who are not able to be in spaces like this where policies are being formulated and programs are being built, I'd like to say thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Shukran. And I hope that you are able to take as much out of today's panel. I am very, very privileged to be here. I am Ame Kwamwa. I am the Director of Programs and Partnerships for Opportunity International. For those of you who might not have heard of Opportunity International, we are a development agency that partners with several institutions across various sectors. We are 53 years old. And what we do is that we build livelihoods by creating pathways out of poverty through three verticals: agricultural finance, education finance, and our micro-enterprise programs. A core tenet of our work is that we are always using human-centered design strategies to build solutions with the end user in mind. We are always asking ourselves, who is our persona and how do we solve their pain point? Over the last few years, we have worked across Africa, Latin America, and these are our main core markets. And we have reached over 20 million people around the world. We are excited about the power of generative AI. And I'll tell you a very quick story. When Cyclone Freddy hit Malawi last year, because Malawi is one of the countries in which we work in, our digital innovations team were in the country to speak to smallholder farmers who you already know have majority women in that bracket. We found out that one of them, who is Anna by name, had lost 90% of her soya crop farm to the cyclone. Together with our team, we were able to develop, using generative AI, an application that enables Anna and so many smallholder farmers like her utilize the power of AI to ask questions about what crops they should be growing, what pesticides they should be using, and also because this is integrated with WhatsApp, we're able to leverage data from the Ministry of Agriculture in Malawi to be able to answer all of people like Anna and all of her other farmers in that region, their questions on how to adapt to climate change. That app is called Ilongizi, and we are looking at spreading that and building scale, like all of the other panelists have said, across. I'm very excited about the people who are here with me today. They cut across various sectors. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell us their names, the institutions they belong to, and then in one word, when they think of generative AI, what comes to mind? And I'm going to start with my far right, Jeremy. I think, Jeremy, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeremy Queno. I'm the CEO for Jumo Ghana and General Manager for Jumo Africa. So I oversee our operations and partnerships across the now 8 markets that we're currently in. For those who don't know, Jumo is we consider ourselves a Pan-African fintech that partners with banks and mobile network operators to deliver access to financial services to those financially excluded in emerging markets. When I hear of generative AI, I think the one word that comes to mind is empowerment. And I think we'll delve deeper into that as we go along.
Thank you, Jeremy, and welcome. Hi.
Good day, everyone. My name is Uyoyo Zeno Adosio. I am the lead digital transformation expert at the bank, the African Development Bank, just to qualify that. As we know, the African Development Bank is Africa's premier development finance institution. We finance across the value chain from digital to agriculture to energy. And when I hear generative AI, I hear productivity.
Thank you, Yo-Yo.
Thank you, Ama. And good morning to all of us. My name is Jerry John Punyo from the Kwame Nkrumah University
Professor Jerry John.
Professor Jerry John Punyo from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I am the Dean for the Quality Assurance and Planning Office. I also lead the KNUST Engineering Education Project, which is one of the Africa Centers of Excellence, with a focus on ensuring quality education. Most importantly, for this conversation, I'm also the responsible Artificial Intelligence Lab Scientific Director. When I hear of generative AI, what comes to mind is transformational.
Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. AI and generative AI and all of its other elements is the cool kid on the block. In the last, from the keynote to the panel that just came before ours, there's been conversations around ensuring that everybody gets a share of the cake. So Yo-Yo, I'm going to start with you. From where you sit at the African Development Bank, when you think of generative AI and the way it's evolving, and looking at the diverse continent, the diverse context on the African continent, what do you think is one of the way in which we can, or some of the ways in which we can ensure that everybody gets on board this bandwagon? Because it is where we are going now. Thank you.
That's a great question, Ama, because when you talk about AI, you're talking about large data sets, right? And if you look at how much data is generated from Africa against the global world, I think when I was doing my research, about 1.3%. And it's obvious, many people are not online. So how do they get captured? Many governments barely have e-government services. They barely even know their citizens. Talk less about how AI would know them. And AI works like any computing system. It's garbage in, garbage out. Data in, data out. So if you're not recognized, then it doesn't generate for you. And it's interesting, when the first models of AI facial recognitions and came out, it couldn't recognize some black faces or some black hands. It's just the way it works. And so if Africa is to capture, and if this is to be inclusive, the first thing we have to do is, as a nation, leveraging this DPI, digital public infrastructure, we need to find ways to make sure that the data, in a way that protects them, anonymized, is captured within the AI data sets. You can see right now many countries are building large language models, like Nigeria is building one, so that at least when the AI is being generated, it understands local languages. So when there's an edutech project, it could actually teach them in the accent of Nigerians. I think Kenya has done one. And so many countries are taking it into their hands to even generate their data sets, because right now data is gold. And so it's really, first, countries making sure that data of the population is captured, from the rural population to the urban population. Second thing is skilling. I can't even say that enough. In this, the way technology is advancing, we can't wait for universities to produce more computer scientists or software engineers that will then learn it and help us. That will be impossible. We need to take what we call at the bank a quality and quantity approach, where you're looking at everyone and you're saying at each level, what type of AI skills do they need? And it's not just the responsibility of the government or DFI, it's an all hands on deck approach. So we're getting in private sector to finance this as part of their CSR. We're getting government to open centers beyond academia, beyond even like town halls in some cities are being used to train, right? Libraries have training. We are mandating private sector to start curating curriculums or supporting the financing of curriculums at a citizen level. Because imagine this, by 2050, Africa population will be 830 million, right? If we don't have the skills to utilize AI or generative AI, whatever form it takes, then do you know how much exclusion that would mean? But imagine if we could leverage the power of our population and make that a machine, a workforce machine that could even power other economies that are growing older. So I think what we are saying is scaling at scale, skilling at scale rather, skilling in a way that is adaptable, readaptable, and provides like lifelong learning opportunities. So it's a deviation from your maybe brick and mortar classroom to looking at citizens and making sure they have skills at every level.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the scaling at scale, and I think that Madam Patricia, the CEO of Telisa, spoke about this when she spoke about the fact that scale is important. But Sakib also spoke about the fact that we need to be able to increase the pace at which we bring everybody into the financial space, and that's where the financial inclusion question comes in. Jeremy, the work you do with Jumo is at the forefront of this. I see how you've partnered with MTN across various countries on the continent to be able to ensure that there's access to finance credit for SMEs. SMEs are very close to my heart. If you look at the data on Africa, it shows the fact that one of the ways in which this continent can move forward is when we empower our micro and our small, medium enterprises. I want to just check from your perspective, how do we ensure that we leverage generative AI in terms of the work with financial inclusion?
Sure. I think that's a brilliant question. I think to a large extent, most people's understanding of generative AI is limited to things like ChatGPT. So in order for you to get the kind of proliferation and scale that you require, you actually have to show people that it can be used to generate positive results for them, or at least solve needs that they actually have. What we try to do is we try to bring in the players who have that interest, such as the telcos and the banks, but lack the technology, lack the analytics, the capabilities, and sort of bridge the gap in trying to open up a base that was hitherto or invisible to them, because these guys are considered to be either risky or, like you said before, it's difficult to find an SME when you have no background on their addressing, they don't have any prior transaction history. What we come in to do is to say, contrary to the popular belief, we actually can assess or underwrite or grant SMEs loans by just looking at the digital footprint that has been built on the rails of mobile money and leverage that proliferation to be able to improve the lives of these people. So our goal is to sort of solve the issue of 360 million unbanked in Africa. And the best way to do this is to meet them where they are. So if you have, and a third of our customers are women, 20% of them are female-led SMEs, you understand that even riding on the mobile money rails, most of the women are only going to leverage these platforms if it's another woman who is the agent that they're dealing with. They also want you to meet them where they are. We are talking about financial service, and most of us have accounts, but for them, if you talk about financial services, or let's use investment, for example, they are thinking of what is a good investment option is a goat or a cow. That's how they preserve their money. So you now need to let them understand that, well, you use mobile money, I can place the same value on mobile money. You can get it in less than 7 steps, and it's delivered instantly into your account. You don't have to worry about people coming to chase you for the money. And our capability is able to use this thin file data, which is really the cream of the crop for us, to be able to grant all of these people access. So I think there's one, meeting them where they are, understanding their need and showing them the result of what AI can do for them, and trying your best to sort of tailor the product so that it has customer fit and satisfies your target MSME. That's the way we've approached it.
I'm going to come back to you on the question of women and access, because I think it's one of the areas that in avenues like this we need to discuss. The fact that even with the advent of mobile money, women are still lagging behind in so many aspects. And because we know that our SMEs are run by women, there's a need to start thinking of different ways in which we engage that particular segment of the market. I have the opportunity to work in India, and you see how with the way their retail public infrastructure is built, and the ways in which different industries are bringing in women, especially to reach the last mile. And I think for the African continent, it would be good for us to look at adopting some of these strategies, because again, it's a South-South win for all of us. Prof, I'm going to come to you, because you said with us at the education intersection. Oyoyo had mentioned the fact that we need to be able to scale at scale. When the oil boom happened in Africa, we were all very excited, but we also have seen in the last few years what that impact has been and how the resources have not been able to reach as many of our citizens and ensure the fact that we are making progress in all sectors. Equitable distribution is what I'm talking about. From where you sit at the university and the different roles that you play across the continent, how do we ensure that in terms of scaling people with the resources and beyond the classroom, that we are giving everybody in our society the chance to be able to have the knowledge and the skill set to be able to partake in this economy?
Thank you very much, Amma. So I want to start by looking at what kind of environment we need to create if we actually should benefit fully from AI as far as the fourth industrial revolution is concerned. And the reason I say this is that, I mean, we've had 3 revolutions, and in all of them, we have been left behind. And primarily because the enabling environment that is necessary has not been created. And it's important that in this particular context, we actually do not miss out. The UN High-Level Advisory on AI submitted their interim report and actually are requesting for feedback as far as that is concerned. And when you read that report, they have indicated what the enablers are as far as adoption of AI is concerned and what various governments need to do if we are to benefit from this boom that we are talking about. 3 key things have been mentioned. They talk about the need for us to lay down the necessary infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we are not just looking at the physical infrastructure. We are also looking at the compute that is necessary to be able to run AI solutions. The second thing that is talked about has to do with the availability of data, and then we've talked about it at length with reference to garbage in, garbage out. But the data that we have actually is not representative, and that is the reason why in some circles we have talked about Afrocentric data sets. And the reality is that, I mean, your data is what runs your AI. Your AI is as good as the data that you train it with. And so primarily what that means is that we need to take conscious steps to ensure that we are not left out as far as data sets are concerned. Then we come to where I'm coming from, building capacity. And so the third thing that they talk about actually is talent. And we recognize that there is a significant skills gap as far as people who have capacity, not just having knowledge in AI, but doing something meaningful to transform economies is concerned. And that is the reason why it is important that intentionally and consciously steps are taken so that we actually narrow that skills gap. How do we go about this? It is important that we start affecting generations right from the basic level. We do not wait for students to get to the universities before we introduce them to digital, tools. It is important that we look at our curriculum at the basic level and see how we are helping children learn some of these things even as they play with the tools. Back at the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Lab, what we have decided to do is to go on outreaches at the senior high schools and the junior high schools so that you create that awareness amongst them that the future belongs to those who can navigate their way through the digital space. So you are either with us or you are left out. And so various curriculum in the various countries need to reflect same. When we come to the universities also and then other jurisdictions, it is important that we create avenues through which students do not just know about AI, but are actually able to use it to develop various tools that can transform African economies. And so, in summary, what we will want to say is that it is important that we build talent. And building talent primarily means that we must be intentional and we must invest in building capacity, like creating labs, like looking at curriculum, like going to the senior high schools and the basic level and ensuring that everybody knows about it. I want to end by looking at this. When we talk of building talent, we don't have to limit ourselves just to the formal sector. Don't limit yourself just to those who come to the universities or to the schools. We are developing these tools so that the average farmer can use. How knowledgeable is he as far as technology is concerned? When Patricia gave we realized that even though we are doing so much, when it comes to uptake and usage, it is so low. If you develop a solution for me to use in the farm, and yet I do not have the know-how, I will have a problem. And so primarily what it means is that let's make sure that we are educating the average person so that they will be able to understand technology and actually be able to use it. And as we do all this, let us not leave out people who are differently abled. I'll come back to this later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think some people may take offense with the fact that you speak about purely Afrocentric data collection, but that's a conversation for another day that we can continue. But Oyoyo, I want to get back to you about the different contexts that exist within the continent when you look at our regulatory frameworks. I was recently in the DRC, and to my knowledge, I had to pay close to $1 to get 1 gig of data. Previous panelists spoke about the fact that they have M-Pesa in Kenya, but you cannot use M-Pesa in Ghana technically. How do we tackle the fact that within the different African countries, our regulatory frameworks are so different that when we talk about scale, because if you look at a space like the US, they build for their market. How do we ensure that across the continent we are addressing this? And because you work for the bank and you hold the purse in more ways than one, how do we ensure this?
That's a good question, and I think I've been having to answer that maybe all through this summit. You see, there is something across African countries, and that is more behavioral than even technological. It's the trust. And so you see countries, like if you look across West Africa, it's just building trust. And there's a lack of trust that if we come on a common framework and a common policy, when it comes to enforcement, do I trust that my country or that country B, will take the same level of stringency or robustness as I will? Is your judicial system strong enough to put the teeth when push comes to shove? And honestly, no, right? And so as a bank, what we've been trying to do is take a risk-based approach. So let's start from simple things. Let's look at the risk management approach, right? There are simple things like trading in small values, 1,000. Informal routes already do this in billions. What's the risk of if the risk crystallizes, it might not even destroy your economy, right? And so we're working with countries to say, let's pick out from policies, from digital trade. Let's try to harmonize it. And it was great to see Smart Africa on the call today because we're working with them currently to harmonize the digital payment policies of 10 countries that have come up to us. Right, and so we're accessing the difference. One country has 100, another country has 10, and we're saying, what's the MVP? Okay, not MVP in terms of like minimum viable product, but MVP in terms of minimum viable policy that we would all operate under. And that's something we're doing. The second thing we're doing is we're now pushing the concept of a Pan-African regional regulatory sandbox. And first, we're starting with fintech. Even within the fintech space, we're looking for which areas of fintech do not really require as much level of licenses. And with these fintechs, I was able to see like the 12 governors, it was music to their ears. Because what you find is, in Ghana, you have requirements to get into a sandbox, and you have also a technical sandbox. Nigeria has one, so the technology is not the issue. Why should I, as a fintech or innovator or an AI innovator, apply with all these tedious steps to the Ghana sandbox? Can't I just use that same process and that same rigorousness to then say, I'm pushing the application to multiple countries because we have harmonized this? And it doesn't still stop the countries from taking whatever charges or tariffs that they want. But why can't we make this seamless? Because the future of innovation for Africa is local consumptions. And the more we have these barriers in place, we're killing our market. We're killing our market. Someone said something that the whole Africa's, I think, GDP production was almost like UK was more. And so we need to create something that allows for skills for innovation. So that's the second thing the bank is really supporting it. So on trust, to say what we are doing is, we are saying let the winners come forward. Results beget results. We would not start with all 54 countries. If we can harmonize amongst 10 and 3 of them are comfortable and more people see that there's clear enforcement metrics, we are financing everyone, the serious starters, that I think more people will come on board. And for innovation, we have regulatory sandboxes.
I see my final panelist joined us. Hi, Darlington. How are you? And my question is going to come to you because we have spoken from the education, from the financing, from the financial inclusion point of view. You sit at a very interesting nexus as you have a lot of international experience in the AI field and with what you're doing in the health sector and in the policy spaces that you interact in. My question to you is that Oyoyo just mentioned the issue of the fact that we need to take down the borders, we need to take down the barriers and ensure that at least the top ones we start out with us. What have you seen within your international space that you think Africa can learn, the best practices that we can learn to ensure that AI space is inclusive and we are bringing everybody on board?
Yeah, I mean, hello. Yeah, there's a lot to be discussed as far as... Hello? Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to be discussed as far as, barriers are concerned. So usually when it comes to Africa, we always make the point about localization, right? You need to localize AI solutions, which is very important. But then at the same time,
Ellen, I'm going to ask for you to bring your microphone up so our online audience can also hear you. Thank you.
So yes, we always make the point about localization, which is very important. But at the same time, if you want to build a product that scales, you need to factor in globalization. So there's always that sort of trade-off, which is, it can be tricky. So for me, I'll talk about our platform. We created this AI medical image interpretation platform, which essentially you can just give it like an X-ray or some other form of medical image, and the AI system will analyze it and pick up different conditions. When we built this, we factored in, first of all, the scale of the problem, which is that there's a shortage of radiologists who are the experts that look at medical images. But the nature of the problem was not just a Ghanaian problem. And this to me is very important. I think if we even compare different African markets, I really appreciate the startup ecosystem, say in Nigeria, more than I even do in Ghana. And the reality is that, okay, one, they do have the advantage that they have a larger market, sure. But there's a more global angle to it. It always feels like, startups in Ghana, and sorry if I'm throwing shots at my friends who are running startups in Ghana, but it feels like there's too much of a local focus. And I know this is kind of counter the points that we are making that build solutions for, the local side. But if you do that, it never scales. Like, again, within the space of AI, ChatGPT was built by what used to be a tiny lab somewhere in the US, and they thought they were building a research demo. And then the next thing you knew, they had over 100 million users in just a matter of weeks. The fastest adopted solution in the world. Is ChatGPT not being used across Africa? Like, we've had sessions with the CEOs in Ghana, and they all said their companies, they use ChatGPT. So did OpenAI have to localize their AI solutions for them? Not really. So that's one thing we've noticed, that you can build solutions that would cater to a larger pool of people. We built our AI solution. We didn't even expect it to go far. We had users in over 50 countries. We had people signing up from China and the rest, because to some degree, some of these challenges are cross-board. But then, yes, this is where the localization bit comes in. There are certain challenges that are peculiar to our scenario, right? So if you talk about infrastructure, if you build an AI system that requires very expensive hardware to use, you're going to leave out a lot of people. So Prof mentioned farmers, right? We also build AI solutions for agriculture. You can't expect farmers to go buy the latest M3 MacBooks to be using AI system to, improve their farming. So definitely you want to build things that are very powerful but require very little hardware. And then, of course, there's the internet, there's the electricity challenges and all of that. But then the good thing is that I always say this, if you can solve advanced technological solutions for this context, it actually works for everyone. Because if you build something that requires very little internet, very little hardware, who doesn't want that? Even people with M3 would appreciate that. So that's exactly what we noticed. So even for that medical image interpretation platform, the Mino AI system that we built, in medical imaging, there's a format that is used that's called DICOM. It's a very huge format. We needed to build a system that converted. Because we realized these challenges, we ended up building the fastest compression and conversion system anywhere in the world. And so everyone appreciates it. It takes literally 2, maximum 5 seconds for our AI system to get an image and interpret it. It's faster than all the other options out there. So those are some of the ways that you can leverage localization towards globalization. The last thing I'll just say is that along these lines, currently we are working on generative AI for health. So essentially we are building what will be the most generalist AI solutions in healthcare. The current versions that we have of this already does several hundreds of medical tasks. So you can interpret medical images, like I mentioned, microscopy. You could just give it symptoms, go ask for prescription, all of that. And so the same principles is what we are applying. And what we also notice, which is very interesting, is this. People tend to align to this sort of mission. To our surprise, we got a partner in the US that invited us to work with them to give us billions of records to then expand this AI system. Then we get some of the leading cancer institutions in Brazil that also reach out to us to take this solution and bring it along those lines. So, yeah, the lesson we've essentially learned is that let the barriers be a way to transcend not just single markets, but the global markets too as well.
Now, listen, because you were late, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us the organization you work with?
Sure. Okay. So my name is Darlington Akogo. I'm the founder and CEO of Mino Health AI Labs and then Kara Agro AI. So we develop AI solutions for healthcare. So those are some of the solutions I just mentioned, and also a number of solutions in agriculture. Outside of that, I even work with Prof. We've been doing the Responsible AI Lab. Also work in the policy space. So was part of the team that created the African Union AI Continental Strategy. Also work with the UN to create regulations and AI governance frameworks for essentially the globe.
Thank you, Darlington. Jeremy, I'm going to just follow up from where Darlington left off in terms of looking at the persona that you work with. We have heard so much about the fact that on the continent we have challenges with digital literacy, power, devices, connectivity. So, Jeremy, this goes to you before we open it up to our audience. How do you work knowing that money is spelled R-I-S-K, risk, and in some cases money is spelled trust? How do you ensure that the access to credit that you're giving to your personas, that that at the end of the day, you are going to, get the monies back and be able to run your business? So I'm basically asking, what are the challenges with working with the market that you do, and how are you solving some of this?
That's a brilliant question. Thank you for that. And I think to the last word that you used, trust, I think Oyoyo said trust as well. And then Darlington talked about, thinking global. I think what we try to do is to try and adopt, or I'll say we think global, but we act local. We try and adopt global best practices for how AI is being implemented and being used, but we try not to make the mistake of trying to think that we know what the customer wants and expects, or what is going to be considered trustworthy, and build a product and impose it on them. What you try to do is go to the customer, try and understand what exactly makes them tick, what exactly they need, and then go back and build the product and work backwards towards them. So as we've spoken about, if you have a woman who is using mobile money and you're trying to introduce her to a financial service, you have to meet her where she is. Like he said, who doesn't want an offline service? So rather than, let's say, going the app route, we tend to use USSD, which is, it's a short code that anybody can use. It has minimal steps. You can use it whether you have data or not. You can use it in an offline setting. It reaches the peri-urban, rural areas as well. We also try our best to integrate or configure our customer journey such that education is built into the journey. Because if you try to educate the customer outside of the journey, it becomes difficult. Everybody wants a loan. If I offered people here money, they would all want the money. So the best place to put the education is in that path to accessing the money. So they understand that once I consent, I'm now giving away my data, which is allowing these guys to determine whether, or my propensity to take and repay a loan. Now they understand that if I don't repay my loan on time, I will not be able to access it again, or I will be declined. You also educate them to understand the benefits, to know that if I do abide by the terms and conditions and pay my loan on time, I will get access to a higher amount at maybe a lower price. So you have to think holistically about the problem. They don't care about how sophisticated your generative AI models or predictive analytics in the background are. They are just concerned about how it enables them to achieve what they want to achieve. So you have to meet them where they are, build trust into the product that you're giving them, build education into the customer journey, and that is the only way, as Engineer Patricia said, you can achieve that scale and that sustainability. For example, in implementing some of those systems, in Ghana alone, we are able to grant 30,000 loans per day, right? If you extend that across Africa, over 2023, we're able to grant about 56 loans per minute. That's just 4 loans shy of granting a loan per second. The only way you're able to achieve this kind of velocity and this kind of the speed or the scale is by baking all these elements into the customer journey and meeting the customer where they are and tailoring your services to their specific needs, not what you think they need. Hope that made sense.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm just going to open it up because I know Bobia is going to send me a sign right now that my time is up. But I'm very much aware that there are people in the audience who have questions. So if the microphone crew, please go round. I saw the gentleman over there. Yes, and there's a lady. May I please take the lady first? Thank you.
Well, thank you to the panelists. All of you made excellent points. But I'm a bit worried because when we were speaking about capacity building, the focus was on the individual. I'm really happy that Darlington came in at the last minute to talk about our companies. Because why are people worried? We don't have good data. But who's using that data? It is not African companies. And the capacity building has to be for African companies, people who may be companies which may be in different sectors at the moment, to be able to take on that challenge. And we don't see enough attention being paid to this. So when we see big solutions, I'm sitting beside the DG of NITA here, and I said to him, but anytime government is making major procurement in terms of digital infrastructure, we see that it's foreign companies that come in. How are we going to design it so that we have cross-Africa, African companies? Somebody talked about Safaricom. I don't consider Safaricom to be an African company. It's Vodafone, rebranded. Why should I give them access to my market because we want to make it Pan-African? So in line with that Pan-African viewpoint, how do we build company capacity, not simply individual capacity so that they can be hired? We are not about building African capacity to be consumers. We want to be producers. We want to drive our own AI. We want to be able to manage our own data. We are not improving our data collection to give it away. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think that... Anybody else? The gentleman.
Please, thank you so much. My name is Thomas Kanga, and I did health service management. So I did my housemanship in a health facility. And I noticed that, with the use of the electronic health records, when we inculcate AI into it, it can help to improve a precision medication and enhance preventive healthcare. So I started something in health tech for Africa. Having heard from Mr. Darlington, I would personally like to see him and try to navigate the way forward. So this AI is really a realistic approach, but if you have the idea, taking it from the grassroots becomes a challenge. So since we are here, I call for more collaboration, partnership, and mentorship in that. So this is not just a question, but an open day.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I just saw a familiar face.
Thank you. This is probably more for you, Prof. So I also run a startup. We are in a few different African countries. There is a sense that with AI, the type of curriculums that we have should change. It's not anymore about rote memorization and testing. It's about how do you analyze data, notice patterns, and come up with ideas in terms of synthesizing that information for the next step. What are some of the tangible things that we can do as people in the industry, as people in government, to really push that needle? Because I think we are still training people as if they have to read volumes of things when now ChatGPT can give you the entire encyclopedia. What are we doing to change that so we can have people who can sort of operate in today?
And the final one?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Jesse Mura. I'm a student at KNUST, and I have two questions, and it's open to everyone in the panel. So my first question is, how can we leverage generative AI to bridge the digital divide and ensure inclusive access to public service for people in Africa, regardless of their location or background? And if you're looking at the future with the use of AI, what specific actions can government and various stakeholders take to promote innovation and investments in AI solutions for public infrastructure development in Africa? Thank you.
So, Prof, you might want to go first.
Okay, thank you. So I will start with the question about what do we do with our educational system in the light of emerging technology. I also sit at the Quality Assurance Office of the university, and so I'm very familiar with what we need to do as far as this is concerned. The reality is that curriculum has to be revised to respond to the needs of industry. And so over the years, the way we have been training our students, if currently what is in vogue is AI, it is important that the curriculum reflects same. And so rather than give students volumes of things to go and read and then come and memorize, we want to rather look at a project-based approach where we actually work together with reference to coming up with various solutions. So it is no longer an issue of what you know, but what you are able to do with the knowledge that has been acquired. Because the expectation of education is to transform economies. And how you do that is not just with the knowledge that you have, but how the knowledge is impacting the average person on the street. And so I agree perfectly with you that we need to take a second look at our curriculum. We need to create the needed environment to support the administration of the revised curriculum. I'm coming from the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Lab, and where we have created room where students who really have ideas with reference to developing solutions within the AI space can come to the lab, work with faculty, and then develop solutions that transform economies. We are not doing it as just faculty, but we do so in collaboration with industry. And as Darlington did indicate, we work closely together. And so we bring players in industry to come and work with our students and our faculty in developing solutions. And I think that is the way to go looking into the future. Coming back to the question that was asked with reference to inclusivity and what can be done to ensure that everybody actually benefits. There's something that I actually wanted to bring up with reference to people who are differently able. I mean, in the many conversations that we have had, what we need to appreciate is that there is a certain category of persons who actually are differently abled, and as we roll out various solutions, such people we don't need to leave them out. And so in the design thinking process, in the design of AI solutions, we need to appreciate the fact that there are people who are differently abled. Commonly, people will say they are disabled. It is important that as we roll out solutions, we don't create a gap, widen the gap further by ignoring them in the design thinking process. When it comes to cost, we have all said this, that as we roll out solutions, we don't have to create a class system where AI solutions become the preserve of the rich. We need to look at AI as a public good, such that irrespective of people's location, whether he is in the capital or he's in a rural community, he benefits from it. If you look at the unique situation of Africa, a significant percentage of our people live in the rural communities. So if we are rolling out AI solutions and we are not intentionally taking them into consideration, we may make the mistake of the first 3 revolutions, and we may not benefit a lot from this.
Thank you very much. Bobby has to sign up. Can I just get a line or two, your final parting words? And I'm going to start with you, Darlington, because you were late.
I think that's the first time you've mentioned I've been late. Final words would probably be, I think we are the luckiest batch in the human generation, human story since the beginning of time. We are living in a time where, I mean, we take it for granted. We take these tools for granted. But for the first time, we've created something that closely matches the best form of intelligence we know, human intelligence, which means that all the gaps that we've experienced in society, most of them are based on labor. Labor is how you make a difference in economies. Labor is why we have issues in agriculture, healthcare. We finally have tools that are powerful enough to address all these issues. Now is just the time we act. And we as Africans need the solutions more than anyone. For the rest of the world, it's a luxury, it's a nice to have. For us, it's a necessity. So I would hope that the conversations we have here are transformed into real actions, real projects, real partnerships. Thank you.
Jeremy?
Sure. So I think that as it relates to generative AI, and to the last point that I think Jesse made about the practical application, one of the most interesting things that we've seen as we look across the continent and globally is that what innovations like ChatGPT has done is that it's brought AI closer to a lot of people. And prior to that revolution, most people could not afford to have AI systems in their businesses, in their small businesses, because you need to have a whole data team that builds these models. What ChatGPT is now enabling is that you are now beginning to see ubiquitous models that are being applied by MSMEs. One of the best experiments that I saw was taking an MSME, let's say like Auntie Pat's Bakery, who sells bread, who could never afford an AI system to give her insights, now has the ability to have a model that shadows her normal cash in, cash out, to tell her that maybe people buy more tea bread on a weekend, so maybe that's what you should make more on the weekend, and during the week it's butter bread. And it may not be a big deal to everybody else, but that change alone is going to give her a few thousand more CDs by the end of the month, which is invaluable to her. So I think, to his point, we are at the cusp of seeing the more proliferation and more practical applications of generative AI, and it's really about how we meet the technology where it is and implement it for real needs that we have. I think those are my parting words. Thank you.
Thank you. Who are you?
Great point in answering that, because I want to say for technology, you work from the problem down to the solution. So the opportunities to use generative AI is limitless. It's as far as your mind can go, and there are many use cases. But just to summarize it, I know that there's a lot of fear about businesses closing down and we not meeting up to the skills of the future. But you must understand that for this fourth industrialization, like Darlington was saying, Africa is blessed. There's no time in history where we had as large a critical mass of educated people in our lives. There's no time in our history where we had connectivity in Accra that could match in DC. Like, we have the ubiquity of knowledge. You could sit down here and take courses in MIT, Stanford for almost free. So I think the world has become flat enough for us to take our destinies into our hands. It might be a good thing that our industries have operated traditionally. So there's really no technology coming to replace the jobs you were really doing because we were not really on the spectrum. This is our opportunity to leapfrog, to take what we have, to take this opportunity, combined efforts, our young generation, our socio-economic problems, which can be used to solve local problems in a global approach. And for us as a bank, we're very committed to supporting the ecosystem. We've done 2 billion to date. We are ready to do more in the continent. And we support not just from infrastructure, building the enabling infrastructure to funds. So I could mention, like in Rwanda, we have the Rwanda Innovation Fund. In Nigeria, we help the government. We're now helping governments for them to think as innovation and investment in startup as a public investment. Just the same way you invest in roads, you should invest as an LP in funds that support your local startups. Globally, VC funds are drying up, and Africa might not be their favorite right now because of the macros going on. There might be a few outliers. So it's now for time for the governments to cash into the future of the continent. And so these are the discussions we're helping on a macro scale, but we just need all of us at different levels to do our part. The young people to be innovative, we as development financing to keep pushing these heavy barriers, and the businesses to keep doing what they do best.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amma. There is a common saying that to fail to plan is to plan to fail. There is so much that has been said. It is important that we have national AI strategies. There are some countries that have already rolled out strategies that are guiding their actions as far as this space is concerned. But there is a significant number of countries within our continent who do not have AI strategies. It is important that we have strategies and we have implementation plans that will guide our actions. The other issue has to do with, we are looking at it from the UN side, looking at it from the AU side, and looking at it from the Ghana side. But the reality is that developing very nice documents is one thing. But committing to implementation, as far as these documents are concerned, is another thing altogether. If we really want to benefit from this, it is important that we walk the talk and really do what we have written in there so that Industry 5.0 will not come and then we say that it's now that we are waking up. Thank you.
Like we say in the Ghanaian context, they have said it all. We need to move from a system thinking to a design thinking. We need to ensure that we are putting our money where our mouth is. We need to ensure that we are bringing everybody on board, from the smallholder farmer to the trader in Mokala Market. We need to ensure that our education systems are reflecting the reality on the ground. And also the fact that when we sign to these documents and papers at these UN meetings and at these AU meetings, we just do not sign those papers, but we are taking concrete steps to implement. And I hope that with every one of us, we do not leave the conversation in this room, but we take these conversations and these action points, and in our own small ways, we implement them in our homes by, making sure our children are getting exposed to generative AI in a very safe way. And so that we can all ensure at the end of the day that Africa and Africans are not just consumers, but we are taking charge and leading the front. There's no better time but now. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day. The next session is coming up. So much.
So we'll take a quick picture. But I said, the challenges that we have and implement or develop solutions that can be used globally. I would entreat you to sit down for the last session. Kindly sit down. We are bringing it all home, and we are basically focusing on how to shape an equitable digital future for all of Africa. And Dr. Engineer Kenneth Ashigbe and his panel are up next. Kindly sit down for us.
Africa is the cradle of civilization, where leaders of men, kings and queens helped build and shape the world we know today. Since the beginning of time, money and goods have moved freely across this great continent until they were interrupted by borders, arbitrary and man-made. Thanks to hard-fought freedoms, digital advancement and human ingenuity, a new day is dawning where money and goods can once again move across these vast lands unencumbered, opening Africa up to movement, progress, and opportunity. Don't let borders limit you. Transfer and receive money quickly, easily, affordably. ZPay, building a borderless Africa.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're bringing it home as has been said. We've had a whole conversation looking at DPIs. We've honed it down to what generative AI is doing. And we agree that we are the cups of the digital evolution. The changes are happening, the transformations are happening. But how do we ensure that the fintech sector in Africa becomes that beacon of transformation? We've seen all the growth that has been happening, the innovation, the offerings that are coming up. But despite this advancement, there remains a significant digital divide. Beyond what Patricia talks about, you have the rural-urban divide. You have, even within Africa, the very developed and not too developed. Why are we not doing what the likes of India and China are doing? And the uneven distribution of digital resources and capabilities is responsible for this divide at every level. Within the continent are disparities at all levels. Certain countries have seen a surge in digital infrastructure and services, whilst others are lagging behind. We have the urban, in some urban areas, as again, if you look at the fact that about 60% are covered and are not using it, and then you have only 25% using it. Even within the urban areas, you have a divide in there. You have the rural-urban divide. Then you also have the gender gap that is all staring us in the face. So how are we going to be able to deal with that? And so to do that, I have a panel of 2 ladies and 3 gentlemen. And we're going to look into the crystal ball. That's what we're going to do. And so I'll ask all of them to introduce themselves. Starting from Andrew first. He would tell us about himself and a bit about what his company is doing so far as this, the issue that we're about to discuss today is. So Andrew.
Thank you, Engineer. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here again. And wonderful conference. So my name is Andrew, as he's mentioned. I actually am the co-founder of ZPay. ZPay is a fintech-led mobile money company, and we specialize in remittances to wallet. Our burden is to make sure that remittances will be received seamlessly across Africa, and our objective is to be able to do this across the continent. Thank you.
Right. So Lee.
Yeah, good morning. I hope it's still morning. My name is Lee Maina. I'm a Chief Solution Architect for mobile money and financial services at Huawei, basically rolling out mobile money across Africa. I do believe we serve more than 50% of the global traffic when it comes to mobile money and fintech. And these are experiences that we do endeavor to basically bring into projects whenever we roll them out. So it's a pleasure to be here and excited to be part of this panel.
Right. So Ethel.
Hello, my name is Ethel Kofi. I am CEO of Adult Technology Consulting. We work at C-level with boards in just strategic design of technology and product roadmaps. My other hat is I am founder of Women in Tech Africa, the largest women in tech group on the continent, about 5,000 women across 30 countries, including the diaspora. So we've got a couple of other countries in there. And then the last, I suppose, hat, which is relevant to this context, is I chair the private sector board that advises on technical and vocational education, especially on the ICT sector.
Thanks, Ethel. So, Dario.
Yes, good morning, actually. So my name is Dario Bianchi. Actually, as you say here, Dario Bianchi, but it should be Bianchi. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at MTN here in Ghana. So I look after all the digital channels, content, video, music, and the new exciting things. So the new platforms like Ayoba, Chinosis, and a few of these other things. So thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to a great panel.
Thanks. So Rashida.
Yes, please. Oh, hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rashida Musa. I am the CEO and founder of Rayma. We are a leading AI integration firm. We help professionals and corporations improve their operational processes with strategic AI implementation. And we use education as the vehicle for this adoption through workshops, seminars, and training with individual teams and professionals. And yes, I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aja. So to start, Ethel and Dario, I want to start with you. So how are fintech innovation, AI, and other digital technologies, how can they be leveraged to bridge the digital gap across Africa? Looking at the barriers to entry and adoption, what do we really need to do to navigate as we look into the future?
Ladies first.
Well, I've said this a couple of times now, I'll probably repeat it again. I think that the question of bridging the digital divide, sometimes we get bogged down with we need internet and access. And I think sometimes, and this is my personal opinion, and we need to stand outside of it a little bit. And if we are going to provide even just government access to government services, I like to start with the idea of being able to provide government services by digital to the populace, because one, it trains the populace, urban, peri-urban, rural, on how to use digital to meet their needs. If we start as simple as using USSD, and I'll keep saying it, if we start as simple as using USSD to enable people to access government information, be able to pay taxes, be able to do the things that they need to do, then essentially we are providing the services before internet arrives. That's my big thing. We worry too much about getting everything right and all the ducks aligned. And if we can use what we're currently using, USSD, things they already use to provide them services, then you train them. And you also train them for the startups who will then bring the services to them. For me, that's the one big thing that we could do to essentially bridge that divide while we fix everything around the cost of internet and that sort of thing.
Right. Dario?
So yeah, and I want to start with, at MTN, our purpose is, we believe that everyone deserves the benefit of a modern connected life. So actually, I think that the title of the panel you copied from MTN, because it's very similar. So we really believe that everybody can do more with digital. And yes, USSD, of course, is a channel, but I want to say something controversial that I also said it last year in another panel, and I got in trouble. I will say it again anyway, that yes, USSD is great, but we need to move customers to digital. We need to get customers to use web solutions, app solutions, because they can provide much more than just USSD. And I think in the previous panel we were talking about people that maybe have different abilities, and you can't use USSD if you're blind or if you can't read. So we need to find a way, using AI and using digital, to bring more people to fintech and to digital. In MTN recently, we are doing some work with a community of visually impaired customers to redesign MyMTN so that they can use it. And AI can help a lot with this. The other part that I also want to mention is that in fintech, and again, there was some panel yesterday, they said the same, is that we are still scratching the surface. There are still so many opportunities. And one of the innovations that I guess in the next few years will become, that is not an innovation anymore, but will become more relevant are the APIs. So how we can get any business to really start using mobile money or fintech to collect their revenues and to generate more income. Social commerce is something that is big in Africa and big in Ghana. What if they can simply connect to our APIs and start collecting revenues, and everything is seamless and easy to use? So there are, I think, a lot of things that we can do, but again, I will say it again, we need to move beyond USSD.
Right. Thanks very much. So Lee, let me come to you. So how can we ensure that the benefits that both Ethel and Dario talks about of digital financial services and which you provide for reach the underserved and unbanked population? If you look at the last fintech report that came, there is still a large track. Even in Ghana, we still have about some 17% that we really need to deal with. And you find out that these people are very difficult to get. So how do we leverage on all these new tools that are coming to be able to reach them, taking our context in Africa into consideration?
Thank you for that question, and it's one that I'm actually very passionate about because, as mentioned, I've pretty much been at the center of rolling out mobile money, even in rural villages when even cars do not go. And honestly, there's no silver bullet. It requires a concerted, multi-sector drive or effort for us to be able to achieve this. And when I say that, it's not just about, improving access, and access can be boiled down into two things. There is the infrastructure side, which again, like we did mention, we need to move everyone to digital, as Dario has mentioned. But again, the core infrastructure to support this is actually missing in those rural areas. And we also need to appreciate that sometimes the private sector might not have the flexibility to roll out that infrastructure beyond where it's perceived to be profitable. So the key thing is that we need to see then, how do we buffer this? How do we create, again, a multi-sector team that involves government, donors, NGOs, telcos, including also OEMs, right? Because it's not just about access of this, internet and everything, but it's also about cheap devices or affordable devices that will bring these customers closer to digital. And like Dario said, and this is something that I must emphasize, we must think beyond USSD. What we did realize in Kenya in Safaricom actually is that when we moved the merchant from USSD to their entry-level smartphone, immediately their transaction volumes grew 7-fold. Why? Because now they've digitized the whole entire business into one and moved away from physical ledger books. Now we begin to take them to digital. The other place is basically also on the service layer, access and also service layer. What we've seen, and I really do not want to regurgitate what most of the other speakers have said, is that we've overemphasized on accounts opening, wallets opening, and payments, right? And granted, yes, this has made fintech to be very ubiquitous. But on the other side, what has happened is that credit, savings, wealth management, insurance, all the way till basically a holistic financial wellness of the users remains unmet. And the only way to meet this, again, is simple, is that we know, and as mentioned by the previous panel, these other sectors require a lot of heavy lifting. Why? Because they're heavily reliant on data. And this data is either missing, or if it's available, it's fragmented across multiple startups and multiple companies. I just went into one of the sessions here, and I just saw everyone there is doing payments. Everyone is focusing on payments and e-wallets. So the question is, we really need to improve the landscape of data. And that the only way we can be able to do that, because this data does not exist, is again do the heavy lifting we do not want to do. And that means digitizing each and every sector from agriculture, retail, et cetera, you name it. That's the only way we can be able to achieve that generation of that data. And there's always a role that government can always be able to play. What we've seen in a market such as Nigeria is that the government was very strict. There are some licenses to fintechs that are given on condition that your operational levels or your operational efforts have to be more than 25% in the rural areas. And that is instrumental in terms of driving that sort of investment outside the urban areas. Probably then, a very unpopular opinion, the same things that government has done to curtail so many players into betting as well as others, it's a question that begs an answer. Should we also do it for fintech? So that at least we've got also players who can now start thinking, if it's beyond payment and payment has already been utilized, how can we go into agri-tech? And then, of course, with government also comes incentives. So it's not just about regulation. We could also incentivize companies that are doing this, operating in the rural areas. I remember, again, borrowing experience from mobile money is that the agents in the rural areas, we always seemed to tweak our systems to give them better commissions, etc., right? So they can survive. So that we need to do. Maybe tax breaks, maybe other things, which we give to companies which operate in those harsh environments. And then, of course, government can still be able to play a role beyond policy. And this is the final one, is that we've seen in a market such as Kenya, where the government is spearheading credit inclusion because that's the primary way of enabling these customers. And what they've done is come up with a government-backed loan. And their key motive was quite simple, is that how do they reach and target these underserved, these unknowns, right? These customers that we all consider high risks because we do not have enough or sufficient data to credit profile them, and just reach them with affordable lending. And based on that, the more actively they participate within our ecosystems, we are able to credit score them, and then we are able to basically move them to a level that the private sector would be willing to now start serving them. So that's the short of it. Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. So Rashida, let me come to you. So in what way, can AI be integrated into our national strategies to accelerate this digital transformation across all levels of the economy, as Lee says, in Africa? And let's explore the broader role of AI in these national digital strategies, not just in fintech, but across various sectors, to foster a holistic approach to digital transformation that benefits all of us, including the specially abled.
Absolutely, that's a great question. I think when it comes to integrating into a national strategy, it's actually been done severally across the continent. We have Mauritius, we have Kenya, who developed a national AI strategy in 2018. We also have Egypt, who developed their national AI strategy in 2021. And they integrated artificial intelligence across various sectors, where be it agriculture, be it logistics, be it even just operational things that they were doing within the government structure themselves. Now, we also have a great example, our brothers and sisters next door, Nigeria. Nigeria has their national AI strategy, and what they're doing, a little bit different than these other countries, is they're making homegrown talent. They're kind of replicating what India did by going into the primary schools, and that's when they started to introduce these science topics. That's exactly what Nigeria is trying to do as well. They're trying to train 3 million tech talents across a variety of tech skills, so that once they're building, you can't say, let's build homegrown solutions for our people, but you're not using our people to do it. And sometimes, unfortunately, we just don't have enough people of our people who are trained in these areas of technology. And now that is what Nigeria is trying to do. So I think as Ghanaians, we have a very large young population, and we need to mobilize them. We need to get them learning these skills, getting into these programs, making it much more accessible to them. But we also have to realize how expensive accessibility to the internet is. For someone in a village, they can't afford some of these data bundles. So the government needs to help these rural areas with even providing free internet centers, so that young people from these communities can come in and use it as I remember public libraries in Canada and America, they have 1 hour time limit. You could totally establish something like that here, so that at least we give them access to the internet. A lot of people have to choose between data bundle or food. And when you have that decision, when you're eating hand to mouth every day, I'm sorry, getting involved in tech, being online is just not a priority.
Right. Thanks. So, Andrew, to close our first round, and this question when I do, I'll let Etel to also take a bite at it, And again, is to look at what a role government can play. So what are the key regulatory challenges in fostering, that we need to deal with in fostering robust fintech system that would unleash also the power of AI and other new technologies? And how can we address these regulatory challenges?
And thank you very much again. So I'm going to break it into three. So let's start from regulatory ecosystem, which is the fintechs and the community. If I even want to extend it to the wider fintech, so it might not necessarily be financial processor, but even a fulfillment that leverages fintech. And then let's look at it from also the end state of it. So from a challenge perspective and into solution, in regulation, we have three things. We have two things that matter. Conduct. The conduct aspect is actually the burden of the ecosystem. I think the firms should be responsible for conduct. That way we will solve the challenges of the ecosystem. So what do I mean by conduct? For example, making sure that we act in integrity, making sure that in integrity we have the right financial crime controls, we have the right onboarding controls or protocols, making sure that we have the right money laundering programs in place. If we did that, then the next is to come together as an ecosystem, and as an ecosystem have common standard protocols. So from a consumer perspective, how do we ensure that consumer behavior is optimal? Through common standard protocols. Making sure we have common terms agreement on how we work with each other. Data sharing, my colleague talked about data sharing. So if we do these things, then we're helping build the ecosystem from the reverse. And we're taking that burden off the regulator. Then on the regulatory side, I think there are two critical things that the regulator should do. The first thing, obviously, is to lay out the objectives of the regulation, be it fintech, be it AI, whatever it is. Laying out the objectives also almost makes it seamless in implementation. I think in the case of Ghana, we've been fortunate that our Payment Systems Act almost pretty much lays out that objective. The second thing that's very critical is then to make sure that we have the oversight. Now, oversight, I'll break it into two: the control function, and then, of course, the non-control function. So in terms of control function, making sure we have the right compliance protocols in place. There are some layers of compliance that should come from the regulator into an ecosystem, and then there are some layers that the ecosystem will develop by itself. Then, of course, if you take a risk, what is the control risk that from a regulatory standpoint is a no-no and is a yes? Then we embed that into ecosystem. I think if we did that, then we'll have a good marriage. That will solve the challenges that potentially will come up or exist in. At the same time, we'll foster the growth of the ecosystem. Now, if you talk about AI and how we can leverage AI, look, I mean, think about it carefully. Artificial intelligence is a necessary evil. It's a very powerful thing. We need it, but it can also destroy us. We can literally go to war from an AI. So how do we make sure that we're safe? I think we should start from a consumer standpoint. Consumer behavior should be the leveraging point. What do I mean by that? We should not put the cat before the wheel. Let's not come up with regulations for AI. Let's not come up with a policy framework right now. I think what we should do is design protocols around just consumer behavior and say, how do we make sure that consumer interactions from an AI perspective is safe and sound? If we did that as a test, we use that to get into market, understand AI more, and we can scale. You know, one of the panelists mentioned, gave an example of how AI can be used to scale an SME business. Before this, we would have used enterprise service bus. To use an ESB, your minimum deployment might cost you about $500 to $1 million, right? That ESB will give you all the analytics about the consumer's behavior. Today with AI, literally probably $10, you can have that information. But then at the same time, we've got to be careful in that deployment because you're exposing the customer. There has to be a certain layer of management of that exposure. And I think that's sort of the thinking we should be having. So I say we go from a consumer perspective and use it to develop the ecosystem. Put together, I think that's how regulatory ecosystem can come together to play.
Right. So I would want you to take a bite of the same question. You know, what the key regulatory challenges that need to be dealt with, to foster a robust fintech ecosystem that would also unleash the power of AI and all the new technologies we're talking about.
Just before I answer that, can I push back a little bit on
Please do.
USSD web conversation. Yes, you know what, I was going to counter it. I think in a market where a gigabyte of data is more than 1% of the average income of a country, we cannot be over-optimistic, right? So we must meet people where they are. And I understand that we must push for as much as we can, but also you come at it from a commercial perspective. When government gets their act together, they'll come at it from the altruistic perspective. But until then, let's work with what we have. Now, we'll move on to the regulatory challenges. I wrote a white paper about 3 weeks ago where I said, I was being a little provocative in that one, where I said, if you allowed MTN, Orange, I think they were top 3, the telcos that had the most number of opcos, to just do wallet-to-wallet cross-country freely, you would do more for the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, you would do more for Africa Trade than you would with all the things that EU and everybody is doing. Any other initiative, right? So for me, the first big thing in this whole sort of Africa trade, working with each other, making the cost of goods across cheaper, is to enable these guys to be able to do wallet to wallet, right? You should be able to just send money across. Andrew does a really good job with remittances. Make it easier. And there was a whole conversation about, in the previous panel, about how we make sure that the policies are defined. Honestly, it's a lot of work. Just allow these guys to do it. Let's move, right? That's one big thing is we need to harmonize these regulations across the different countries. If we are going to do this after thing, the whole PAPs, all these things that we're dreaming of doing, let's enable people that are already doing it to do it, and then we'll move on. The second thing I have is that one of the key problems with regulation, I think, across Africa and Ghana and all these other countries is lifelong regulators. What we need, and I think Ghana, Bank of Ghana and this are getting better at it, what we need is commercial people crossing over to the regulatory side, regulators crossing over. We need both sides to understand each other, right? So a good example is Richard, right? So Richard, being on the commercial side, Group IT Data Bank, then moving to NITA, means he has a perspective of what it means to sit on the other side, which means my conversations with Richard are a little less jarring. I'm not saying we don't, we shouldn't have, but when we have people on the high level that are lifelong regulators, certain conversations are difficult. You just need people who understand on both sides. And I think there has to be a concerted effort on the regulatory side to hire people at high level. We've got Kwame Opong, Bank of Ghana. And I made the case that I think there needs to be a third governor for the Bank of Ghana who comes from commercial, who sits and looks over. And Kwame is doing an amazing job, but give him a raise and put him on the board, right? And so that he is able to push in ways that he cannot do now. And I think those two distinct things help in shaping the conversations around policy. They help in just pushing things, and you have to get them from the commercial. I just want things to work. And if we can get people who also understand what it means to be on our side and be on the other side, and then it's easier for us to achieve these things. Thank you.
Right, thanks. So, Lee, let me come to you for your last bite. And wanting to, so one of the elements that Patricia mentioned was a whole literacy thing as well. So how do we foster a culture of digital literacy and trust to drive adoption of fintech, AI, and these new technologies among the general population? I know you come from Kenya, but you come to Ghana quite often. In our ecosystem where there's a lot of issues around fraud, and most of it being social engineering, how do you build that element of trust so that my grandmother in Shame, for example, would trust that she can sell her cloth, her kente cloth, using what Dario was talking about?
Good question, and thanks for it. Let me start with the trust question. So fortunately or unfortunately, trust is earned. And for trust to be earned, it has to start somewhere, and it starts at transparency, right? So basically, as an association, as a fintech industry, we definitely need to come up with some moral code of conduct, strict guidelines, and also regulations in terms of how do we communicate with customers in terms of what are the finer details of each product we have, because one small player can literally spoil the name for the whole entire industry. Secondly, it's also thinking about how do we ensure that the platforms we are deploying are actually resilient enough, right? Because you're looking at not only at security of customers' money, but also looking at how can you best be able to evolve your system in terms of any other incoming threats that are evolving. And then, of course, we also do have to look at what can we also be able to do as fintech, because there is also a lot of engagement that we can be able to develop within our user experiences that will help a customer understand our solutions a little bit better, right? And then, of course, just thinking about it, we live in an environment whereby right now we've got super applications with the mini apps, embedded financial services, all the way to, all powered by AI. So we can literally have an engagement with a customer where we are telling them you are running low on, your funds in your wallet. You've got this bill that is due maybe in the next 5 days. For you to be able to meet that bill, you either need to stop what you're doing or, your current spending patterns, or even just locks the funds that are required to make that. So there's a lot of engagement information we could be able to drive. However, we also do agree that it's bigger than all of us, because we do have a very big demographic in our market that remains, not techie savvy or not well educated for us to be able to have engagements with them. So we now start to see, can we borrow the learnings that mobile money, because it did evolve to go as far beyond where everyone has gone, is that I remember when you were engaging a new customer, you needed approximately 15 to 20 minutes on average to fully convince them in terms of how the service works and basically just build that trust avenue. So for digital literacy, apart from the digital sort of things, do we also need an offline sort of experience, taking these services closer to the users? So we have a very big ballooning youth demographic. We need to see how we can actually be able to encompass them into our ecosystems, and they play a critical role because they will be the ones to achieve that last mile conversations. Like you did say, whenever your grandmother receives money, the first thing she does is to call you to confirm it's money. Second, she's going to call either one of your cousins who is in the village or somebody else and ask, how do I cash it out? And I can bet you before the end of the day, she'll have learned how to cash it out. So how do we encompass this youth to be part of the ecosystem, either as developers or even just as aggregators of that information?
Right. Thanks. Rashid, I'm going to leave you for last, and let me get the two men who have not had their second. So this question is going to be for Dario and Andrew. Both of you will take, and it's about partnerships, collaborations. We're talking about that. So what role can partnerships between fintech startups and traditional financial institutions, academia, government play in accelerating the digital financial inclusion that we seek? So Dario, if you can start, then Andrew would.
Yeah, sure. So I think in Ghana, we have a lot of very good examples. I mean, national roaming, I think was mentioned earlier on, is one of them. GIPS, to enable interoperability, is another good one where you can send money from one mobile money operator to another one. And then most recently, I mean, last year, I guess, was what we have done, ECG with Hubtel and mobile money to enable payment of electricity bills. So all these things are really when different entities, private, public, and come together, and they can really build something that for the greater good. I guess there's much more we can do, and I think the two key areas where I see we can do better is, one will be the next big thing will be credit scoring. So how can we make sure that we all have a lot of data? So ZPay has a lot of data about remittance. We have a lot of data about mobile money and many others. So how can we make sure that we use all these data so that we can provide loans to more people? Today, when Jumo does the assessment of credit and so on, they could say, look, maybe this customer, I don't want to give credit, but what if we give them more data so that they realize that actually that customer is potentially credit worth? And together with this is open banking. The government started working on a policy for open banking, and in Nigeria is already sort of live, I guess. How can we do more? How can we push open banking so that fintech, banks, mobile money can start sharing data, and as a customer, I can have the view of whatever I spend in one simple interface. I keep on mentioning this example. I'm a Revolut customer, and on my app I can see what I spend with Revolut, but also what I spend with my banks, credit card, and everything, all in one app, so I have full control over my spend. So open banking, I think, will be the next big thing, and we need to be bold enough to push the institutions and the regulator to really go ahead with this policy and making it a reality.
Right. Andrew, so the same question, the role of partnerships in this revolution we're talking about.
So I'll take it from Daryl. If you look, just judging from what Daryl is saying, we've actually built the infrastructure as a country. In fact, even Africa, we build infrastructure. Today, we have entities that can terminate into bank accounts across the continent, be it NIBS, be it GIBS, be it ZIBS, ZIMS, Switch, whatever. So we have infrastructure. That infrastructure enables us to collaborate, but the level of collaboration is very limited. And so I'm going to take us to a rude awakening. That rude awakening is, I think, as an ecosystem, we're not accepting that there are inefficiencies in our entire systems. Not in the infrastructure, but how we operate, the policy framework, etc. If we accept that there are inefficiencies, then we can build from there a collaborative model that will work. So I'll give you an example. We have policies, like in Ghana, today, I think as SME, you can transfer up to $50,000 without paperwork. But walk into a bank to do a $50,000 payment, it will take you maybe 5 hours in a week if you're lucky. And that very paperwork you don't need, you would have to bring it back again. So my thing is, do we have efficiency? We don't, but we have the infrastructure. So if we can accept these things, then the fintech can come in and say, I'm going to collaborate with the bank, you sponsor me, I'll bring my infrastructure to enable that efficiency to happen. If we did that, then from a policy standpoint, the regulator can come in with a thematic review and say, you know what, let's review these processes and lessen the burden, even though they don't have to, because already the act exists, the policy exists. You see what I mean? So I think that we need to take collaboration and partnership from a new layer. We need to start looking at it differently than the way we're looking at it. I think we've been looking at it from an infrastructure perspective for a long time. If you look at Airbnb literally disrupted the hoteling industry, if that's a word, right? Now, how did they do that? They did that because they realized that not everybody can afford $100 or $50, $100 or $200 hotel room. So they look for different options. Today, it's a wonderful story. Look at Spotify, look at Netflix, all of these things have been done. So I think let's look at it from that perspective and disrupt, so that we see that disruption as a positive disruption and we work together to achieve that. So MTN, my good friend, I love MTN, we're best friends. I think we need to come together as the giants in the market and take it to the next level. Maybe that's what I mean by the common standards, the common term agreements. We've done it, you've done it on roaming, it's worked very well. What are the common terms agreement we can come together with that will make it work? Look at Netflix and Sky. Sky is arguably the largest pay-per-view platform in the world. Today you can watch Netflix on Sky TV. It was necessary for that ecosystem to grow. So I think that's where we are, basically, if you ask me, Ken.
Right, thank you, thanks. So Rashida, to close it, before I open 5 minutes for the audience, how can AI tools be used to tailor financial products to specific needs and context of different African populations, promoting inclusivity?
Absolutely. So when it comes to that, I think we talk a lot about engaging with this technology, using this technology, deploying it, but really, how are these individuals in rural areas of our continent going to actually use these tools? Some of them don't read, write, or speak English. And if you think about most AI tools today, you have to engage with them in a high resource language, be it Arabic, Spanish, French, English, right? Which unfortunately some of our people don't speak. We need to think broader, and we need to work hard to actually develop large language models of low resource languages. right? When we talk about having a USSD platform where you can send payments from Ghana to Nigeria seamlessly, let's take it a step further, right? And have them communicate with each other. Imagine I am a trader in Ghana, I speak Tree, I can now be communicating seamlessly with a trader in Nigeria who speaks Yoruba, right? And when we talk about the barrier to entry, we're still keeping that human aspect of it. We're not telling our grandmothers to punch a bunch of buttons and get on platforms and learn how to do prompt engineering. We're just telling them to speak as you would, right? And then the machine does the work for them, right? So I think that that's a huge thing that we should work on. Nigeria, for instance, just recently announced that they are working on a large language model where they're going to be training it on 5 low-resource accented English. That's also a huge thing that we get missed behind. How many times have you used something? You have to say it multiple times because of the way that you speak. So it's going to be able to pick up the ways that we say wata or, things of that nature so that we're not left behind when it comes to this technology. And another thing that banking solutions can really work on is I think we've adopted a Western model of banking. Individual accounts, individuality, my money. But how many people here have ever done susu? Right? How many people here or even know someone who's done that? So if we can have that in a more regulatory framework system that's organized through a large financial partner like MTN, then you're tailoring your services to actually the cultural nuances of the people and how they practice and share money.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. So we'll take 2 questions. Okay, one. I wish I had a lady. Okay, one. Okay, so William has a question as well, so we'll take those 2 questions. Chief.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Kwame Janso. I'm a lawyer, but I'm the chairman of the oil and gas sector of the AGI. Now, let me ask the question, and the question is to all of you. Other countries have been able to stabilize the elephant in the room. You compare us to the Western countries, you compare us to the Asian countries, China, but have we been able to do it? And my question is, Dumso, power. All the fine things we're talking about, if we don't have the power, forget it, ain't gonna work. So how does private individual, the private companies, the MTNs of this world, help in making sure that we have efficient power to run fintech? Right. Is it that we stand aside and say it's for government, or is it that we are the ones who put pressure on government to give us the kind of power that would help run some of the things you're talking about?
Right.
Thank you.
So William, we'll take your question and then I'll come to the panel, and I hope I'm also allowed to go into that your power question. William, you have a microphone? Okay, so anybody wants to start with the power? Andrew, you want to do that?
Yeah. I love the power conversation. I'm going to talk about power from disruption. Let's take Cantonment, let's take Laboni, let's cut it all across the region back. Probably we'll have about maybe 1,000 generators in it. We're talking about availability of energy, right? Whatever we do, we'll have generators. If those generators can actually be put onto the grid, so that when there's a power cut, all the excess capacity can feed the grid in that same community. So that the lower housing, that the South, as we like to call in that neighborhood or community, will be able to still leverage that power. Then because it's cheap, because it's free capacity really for the state, you could localize it from a community-based approach that the community benefits from the revenue. So the revenue comes back into the community to develop the community. I think that what is happening to us is that we're scared to evolve as a people. We're just scared to evolve. Let's just evolve. Because we have the infrastructure, we have the thought process. So maybe that might solve that problem. Then from a policy standpoint, Rwanda did it. When I moved into Rwanda in the early 2000s, they had a mini-grid policy. You could set up a mini-grid if you want to. So maybe let's lessen that as well, so we feed the national grid. I just think that there are simple things we can have quick wins. And sometimes we don't even need the politicians to do that. We just need collaborative platforms, be it associations, communities, even the chiefs, so as to do that. So my piece is, let's not be scared, let's just evolve.
Right. Anybody else want to? Okay, William, you have the microphone? Yeah, okay. So I think mine is also, I'll tag mine to that, still about the phone issue. Everything that we've been talking about, all these wonderful ideas, it requires you to have more or less a smartphone. You know, so what are we doing? What can we do to make sure that the prices are low enough? What financial models are out there? What are the telcos doing? What are we doing to make sure that we can give as many people a smartphone? Thank you. You're looking into my eyes. Yes. Did you want to take that?
Not because I'm from Huawei and devices, but more so because I'd like to basically frame it from a different view, basically seated at the center of what my colleague on the left said, and also the evolution story, and also just acknowledging where we are right now. Of course, in terms of affordable devices, there's a lot that can be done, but I can tell you it all comes from regulation. I've been told not to mention too much about Kenya, but right now the Kenya government is crafting something with Safaricom, whereby the goal is to develop a smartphone that is less than $50, and they've been able to do it. I think they've got right now more than 1 million devices being distributed in the market. Only government can power these sort of things. We do not have the capability. Second part is also on electricity or power, as it mentioned. We cannot solve this as a fintech industry, regardless of how well we want to do it. So the question is, how do we align ourselves? Because one thing is simple. Mobile money has gotten to these people even without electricity. So we need to learn from that sort of exposure, because there is an agent. The agent can always be able to serve all these sort of customers even without electricity. You've talked about the device. The question is, are we blocking ourselves by thinking it's only a smartphone that can access fintech? While in China has been very disruptive, you can walk into any shop, any kiosk, and you're able to transact purely by biometrics, right? The phone just holds an account number or a virtual ID. In South Sudan, where there is neither power, nor electricity, nor even internet, it's actually a pose and your face. And that's all it's required for you to be able to transact. So we might need to be disruptive in our current architecture of how things work, as we hope, plan, and pray that the government also, does come to the center.
Right. Thank you very much. So, okay. So I'll take that question. And then as I prepare to do that, I'm going to come back to the five of you. My question is for you to look into the crystal ball and tell us what trends you see in the efforts of shaping this equitable digital future for Africa. That's what I would want to come to you to close. Yes, madam.
Hello.
My bit on par. Okay. My chairman is looking into my face. She can take it, but I'll say it. Please.
So I have a question. My name is Lala Pedre. In what ways can companies like MTN and ZPay collaborate with educational institutions to enhance the integration of practical financial skills into academic curricula, preparing students for the demands of the modern economy that we currently face in Ghana, in countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and across Africa?
Right. So Dario and Andrew, this is for you.
Yeah, so funny enough, as MTN Group, we started a year ago looking at what are the new e-verticals where we want to operate, where we believe we can play a role. And so one of them is health, and you're going to hear a lot here in Ghana, because Ghana will be the pilot market for that. But we're also looking at education. So we are doing some work in South Africa and in Nigeria exactly on ed tech. So how can MTN, with mobile money, with data bundles, help some of the ed tech companies to really grow and have a bigger impact? So there will be some announcements soon, but I'm sure that that's going to be is a key area for us for the future. And again, it's going to be around payment, but also around facilitating anybody to really be able to do a training, follow a course, and up to a point of a certification. So there's going to be some announcement pretty soon on this topic.
Right. Andrew?
And thank you. That was a lot of English. I get intimidated by that. Let me say this. So we decided 3 years ago to go into academia. So we partnered with University of Ghana Business School. We've actually built an innovation hub at the business school. And the objective with that is to help bring ideation from academia into industry. Because, I mean, granted, this new revolution we're in will be driven by the youth. And I think we all admit that we're more youthful today in Ghana and Africa than anyone else. In fact, for the first time, Africa is going to pose in many countries, and it'll be largely driven by the youth in terms of decision making. So we think that if we can take the ideas and help them to monetize it, it will be a great thing. That's our first thinking into that. As we go along and as we get into campus, I'm sure we'll figure out how to bring education more and more into that space, if I may answer.
Right. Thanks. So just want to close. Rashid, I will start with you. Your closing thoughts looking into the crystal ball.
I think looking into the crystal ball when it comes to artificial intelligence and across all sectors is we have to stay ahead of this race. Like I mentioned, certain countries like Kenya and Egypt, they've already started their national framework in 2018. So we're already many years behind. It's really important that within your organization, you become an advocate for these technological advancements, for using these tools, using them effectively. There are courses out there. I think it's very important for leaders and organizations to incentivize and prioritize continuing education in this field. Even for those of us in this space, you find out about things, all the time. The system is changing all the time. I mean, ChatGPT just launched a brand new model that's about to completely change everything that we already know. So it's very important that we don't just come to these conferences and hear about AI and talk about it. It's time to actually be practical in our advancements. It's a time to actually think about ways that we can really tailor AI to our context. I believe someone said in the previous panel, but are we just going to be pure consumers? Because we have been for a long time, right? Or are we going to be active architects in navigating and developing these very vast systems? Thank you again.
Thank you. Daryl.
Yeah, so I want to touch on what Rashida said earlier on around the work that is happening in Nigeria around the new language model, and I just hope it's also going to cater for Italian accent, so I will be able to, it will work for me, because sometimes Alexa doesn't get me. So, no, but talking about this is, 2 days ago, OpenAI announced the new ChatGPT 4o, and that can actually help with translation and so on. And immediately, the shares of Duolingo, that is a language learning app, plummeted 5%. So that means that maybe in the crystal ball is that language is not going to be a barrier anymore. That doesn't mean that I still believe we still need to learn how to speak other languages, but hopefully it will enable many people in rural areas from Africa to talk to somebody in the US without the need to learn and without any barrier.
Right. Thanks. Atel?
Right. I was going to say with what's happening in Nigeria, it's what happens when you have somebody who's been on the other side actually become minister.
Yes.
Well, okay, so two sets of things. I wanted to give the numbers because I actually estimated and crunched the numbers, and back to the regulatory question, on what it would look like if all MTN and Orange, and I think a third party, all the opcos they had across Africa did wallet to wallet. So that would, if we looked at it as a 5 to 10% reduction in, 5 to 10% reduction in the cost of cross-border trade, that we would be estimating something from 70 billion to 140 billion trade volumes, and we would be looking at something like 0.25 to 0.5 increase in GDP. So these numbers, I mean, these are estimates, these are numbers that we sort of crunched because I was using it to write a white paper, but these are very real things that will happen if regulators become enablers, not blockades. Okay, now looking into the crystal ball. So we're never, I think in Africa and the AI revolution, we're not going to have first mover advantage. I think we're going to have to plan for what it means to be the second mover and what advantages we bring to it. I think that's what we need to be thinking. I think there is, they are leaving us, AI, they're leaving us, and we're worried about that. But we're not going to have that first mover advantage. So from a strategic point of view for policymakers and for regulators, what is our distinct advantage? What is our second mover advantage? And somebody alluded to the fact that we are the most youthful continent, right? That's one of our advantages. We need to start looking at the AI, the sort of future tech conversations in terms of, so people are going on ahead of us. What do we have that will enable us to be better, stronger, hopefully overtake? I don't want to use the word leapfrog because tech, we use leapfrog a lot, but overtake or at least stand on par with the people that have come before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, crystal ball.
Okay, I'd say we definitely need to accelerate DPI adoption and DPG, and not just DPI, but good DPI. As you've seen, we are heading into a credit inclusion phase, right? And with this, there is a lot of data that we could be able to leverage on from each other, as well as the government just being a stakeholder of some of the key information that is required. So that will definitely accelerate the pace at which we are going to evolve and reach the underserved and also the underbanked. Crystal ball, I think we're heading into a very interesting time where it's not just technology that is going to disrupt our fintech business, but also a giant is awakening, and this giant is basically banks. Traditionally, they were always happy with serving the high-value customers, but of late, they've decided you're eating too much of their lunch. So they do want to come into that space where they want to serve this because it's basically eroding their current accounts. And a couple of things we need to look out for is that transactions are going to become free. P2Ps, cash-ins, cash-out, all these sort of vanilla transactions will become free. So even these other sectors which have remained slow in terms of adopting fintech, agriculture, insurance, etc., we might now need to consider how we get into them because the other part will definitely disappear very fast. So
right,
that's my take.
Thanks. Andrew, last word.
Thank you. So I'll take it from Ethel and then my colleague next door. Look, yesterday, I read a report from Roland Berger that says that global payments would increase to $3.5 billion in volume a day. Africa is estimated to be 48% of that. If my math is correct, and it usually is not, it means on a monthly basis, Africa could easily be doing about 50 billion. But these monies that we're talking about are sitting at the bottom of the barrels. They've not come up yet. And the third economy, if not even the fourth economy of most African countries. Okay, so looking into the crystal ball, we're talking about Africa free trade. We need cross-border, we need to open the borders. But the borders have been open. They've been open for a long time because they never really existed. If you take Sierra Leone, if you take Gambia, if you take Conakry, Guinea-Conakry, the Mano River, they're common types. They understand each other, they migrate, they move in and move out on a weekly, monthly basis. Even in our own environment, we do that in West Africa. Between Togo, Benin, they move in and move out. Between Ghana and Nigeria, we move in and we move out. I think what's going to happen, Ken, over the next 3 years is simple. 3 things I'm betting on is AI, fulfillment. Fulfillment would include payment. It's going to be very big. What do I mean by fulfillment? Amazon is nothing without fulfillment. Amazon is just a big brand if it doesn't have fulfillment partners. Africa is going to go into big fulfillment. You're going to have major fulfillment players on the continent who will move goods. It's going to be very possible, maybe even 5 years from today, that I can order a McDonald's and there's no McDonald's brand in Ghana. Somebody just puts the burger on and wraps it with a label, and fulfillment will deliver it. Whether global leaves or not, that's what I'm betting on. So for the next 3 years, I feel like West Africa will open up so much on the fulfillment side. It will be easy for me to buy flowers in Kenya and have it here the next morning, because the flowers will be sitting in Ghana. So that's one. Second thing, AI. AI, as we've been talking about, and Rashid, I like what you say a lot. AI is what's going to change everything for us, but it's the thing that will kill us. I think that people in this room, people in these countries will get up and build AI around consumer behavior so that we can interact. Because, I mean, think about it. People have how many people have WhatsApps that you know they don't speak English, but they send you a message in English? It happens already. It's happening. So we just need that AI to make that English complete so we can understand it, or whatever language it is. It means that my grandma can send me a message, my Chikwame, to say, and I'll get it in English if I speak only English. So I think that AI is the next thing too that will be propelled over the next 3 years. I'm looking at it on consumer behavior, service delivery, making sure that we have optimal service performance. So these two things. Then on the payment side, I see us opening our borders more. Airtel talks about the fact that it's become necessary for regulators to just allow it to happen. Suppose with all these outbound approvals coming through from various markets, of course, if you look at the Francophone market, these are bilateral markets. It's already open. You can do outbound. So this is what I'm saying, that we need to find the inefficiencies that exist around the infrastructure we built so that we can make that inefficiencies disappear. And that's what will happen over the next 3 years, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for my partner. Big round of applause. So really there's a hope for the future. Huh? So it looks like what happened at Pentecost, where they could hear everybody's language, was actually just AI waiting to happen. You know? So that's going to happen. You know, that's really going to happen. And to answer your question, I would answer it, but I'll tell you, a lot of the issues have to do with us. Yeah. Even the issues around net metering, for even solar. Why are we engineers preventing that from happening? How is it that we decide that you want to help get the telcos and the fintechs to be part of it? If we bring the panels duty-free, when we bring the batteries and all of that, the duties are on it. So if we really want to deal with the issues, one of the challenges in our country is the fact that our whole electrification thing has a lot of inefficiencies in it. That's why I like Andrew's thing. When you decide that you're going to let Akosobo supply power to the north, when you know that by your electrical engineering, you're going to drop a lot of voltage and the losses are going to be on that. You know, so we need to start as citizens, start questioning some of the things. Some of these things are populist. You know, and we need to stop it. We need to start taking pragmatic solutions that resolve our problems. The mini grids, let that happen. You know, so I'm not a panelist today. I'm not a panelist today. But again, one of the last things, as we talk about all of these things, trying to take DPI to all the people, how are we going to solve the problem where $6 million is spent on fixing fiber cards? How are we going to fix that? So that instead of using that $6 million to extend fiber to Chama, my village, we spend it in the 3 fixing fiber cards. How are we going to resolve the issues where for every road that you build, you cut all the fiber? How are you going to do that? So we need to start staring some of these things in the face and dealing with them. Richard will tell you how much NITA is losing to fiber cards. We need to fix some of these problems. And we need to start taking some of these issues and dealing with them. So the partnerships are going to be important. So I'm hoping that after we've done all of this, between government, within the operators, and academia will all come to the table and try finding solutions to our problem. Let's start learning to collaborate, and it's really going to be important. Our regulators should stop wearing the hat that I'm regulator. Let's bring grey matter into the room. So when we sit to discuss, we discuss from a point of knowledge, not just because you are a regulator or you are a policymaker. You know, let's all come together. Let's get our customers as part of the conversation. So when you're designing the products for them, you are able to design it to fit them. How would my grandmother, again in Chairman, be able to take the phone and not go and give it to somebody to go and catch the money for him? How would she be able to speak to the phone and be able to withdraw her money, do her transactions? Those are the things that I am hoping that the partnerships, the collaborations will be able to do. So to close, MT4D that is happening under the auspices of the 3i Summit, we're grateful for the opportunity for you to engage with us. MT4D 2025 will happen next year, and I'm sure 3i Summit will also happen next year. We'll be seeing you. But the most important thing is that the things that we've come to discuss, let's try and as much as possible to do only one. Only one. If all of us will attempt to fix one, do one, collaborate one, start something so that by the time we come next year, we'll be reporting what we've been able to do to ensure that the things that have been said that are in the crystal ball actually happen. So thank you all very much. We thank our sponsors. We thank Bank of Ghana and all the organizers of the 3i African Summit. We thank our speakers and everybody for making this happen. Thank you very much, and God richly bless us all. So we'll take the picture.
My family pictures now. Choosing your bed, not the send this
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, as they take the pictures, we would like to say we are very grateful to you as an audience. You have been truly, truly, truly amazing. And 20 speakers led by our two keynote deliverers, as well as 3.5 hours of insightful conversations around digital public infrastructure. And I'll still go back to what Engineer Madam Patricia Bunai said: implementation, implementation, implementation. We'll see you next year at MT40 2025. Thank you so much.
Africa is the cradle of civilization.
The ladies are Coffee.